afternoon. Welcome to MidWestDreamin. So this is my first time in Minnesota. I'm very excited for this particular session. So this year, ChatGPT and Einstein and artificial intelligence has been the buzzword. So Salesforce has moved to that direction as well and enhanced its platform, the AI-enabled platform, which is Einstein. So Einstein is pretty vast. So in this session today, I'm just going to focus on a particular segment, which is Einstein Vision, which I feel is the most easy to configure for your end users and can give the maximum value. So the topic of my presentation today is utilize Einstein Vision to quickly digitalize your document using optical character recognition. So a brief introduction about me. I'm working as Senior Digital Solution Architect with Entity Data. So I'm a Salesforce certified application architect and also an AWS certified associate solution architect. I do have certain document certifications in the Salesforce and AWS side. And I'm also an official contributor of the Financial Force Library, which is the most used Apex framework in the Salesforce world. Other than that, I'm into sports. I played cricket professionally. I play soccer recreationally in Vancouver. I'm based out of Vancouver, Canada, and I do ski in the winter. I do have a son, preteen, so we do a lot of activities together. So the purpose of the talk is very simple. So majority of the time, I actually give talks in the architect track, so which has more different complex solutions. So this time I'm actually coming into the developer track. So the core focus is two things, is to get you familiar with Einstein Vision. So you might not be in the Salesforce world. So this is an opportunity to understand how the AI platform works in the Salesforce world. Or if you have been in the Salesforce world, haven't utilized Einstein, so this might be an opportunity to get a better understanding of it. And secondly, I wanted to actually make it much more geared towards technical implementation. So whatever I'm going to cover today will be very handy for the people who is going to do the implementation. So one of the takeaway that I want from this session is that once you get through this presentation, you have this particular deck, you'll be able to implement the Einstein Vision, particularly the OCR for your organization. So in terms of agenda, I'm going to go over the Einstein and Einstein Vision, what it is, and then I'm going to dig down to the optical character recognition. This is where you extract text from different images and PDFs. So it has been there for some time, 3-4 years, but Salesforce have enhanced it. So I'm going to talk about some of the latest enhancement. In terms of the implementation, one of the core part is the authentication. How do you actually authenticate with the Einstein platform? And that's where majority of the difficulty comes. I'm gonna go through that one so that you don't have to browse the internet to figure out what solution you're gonna use. Then I'm gonna walk through how you can actually implement it in Apex and then using flows as well. So using flows, I'll try to make it much more no-code version so that you don't need to have code to get this Einstein Vision working. And finally, I'm going to go through some of the different sources from where you can actually get the text and what does Einstein support. And finally, I'm going to leave some questions at the end for Q&A. So special thanks to all the sponsors who made this event successful. So for the first time, Episoro is a recent addition to our entity family is sponsoring this event. So I'm pretty happy about that. So they have a stall, the booth number 22. If you have any questions regarding some of the services, please reach out to them. So in terms of Einstein, so this is the AI platform of Salesforce, and it has been there for some time. Initially, it started with reporting analytics, and then it has expanded to different other areas. So to me, so there's a lot of capabilities. So I try to think it as a data scientist. So utilizing whatever it provides, you can actually enhance your customer experience. So you can actually get better leads through predictions and customer engagement through different marketing channels. You can enable your customers to identify which deals are more likely to close. You can actually utilize it in different parts of the Salesforce ecosystem. Suppose you have an Experience Cloud, you have shopping carts and so on. So based on Einstein, you might be able to provide the product recommendations based on your customers' behavior. Then it can have the Einstein bot, which enables you to interact with your customers without any agent. So a lot of these things can be automated, and it can actually integrate with the backend to actually provide a lot of suggestions and recommendations to the end users. And finally, if you are in the Service Cloud, it actually allows you to create intelligent alerts using which you can actually know something is happening ahead, so it actually keeps you one step ahead. So there's this lot of documentations, and if you actually talk to a Salesforce AE, they can actually provide you more features that Einstein can provide. So today my topic is more towards Einstein Vision. So Einstein Vision is categorized into 3 different services. The first service is the image classifications. So it actually helps you to identify or classify image at scale. So every day we take a lot of pictures, and then if you accumulate like all the other pictures everybody's taking. So if you wanted to classify those images, Einstein image classification does help. The second part is the object detection. One of the example is if you go into the capture, like in the Google Capture, you are provided with 9 different images. And then you have to identify a particular object in that particular image. So you might have to identify a bridge, a car, and whatever, So that portion of the service is handled by the Einstein object detection. And the last part is the OCR, which is the Optical Character Recognition. So it actually helps you to extract text from PDFs and images. So one of the first questions you might ask that this is pretty trivial, isn't it? So why do we need artificial intelligence in that? I'm going to give a text, and I'm going to give an image, I'm going to get a text, and this is widely used service. So let me give you a scenario. Suppose with the same Google Capture, sometimes you get that image, sometimes you get a text. And when you get this text, like Google asks you to actually enter that text. A lot of the time, the images are very blurry, So you actually have to determine whether it's a C or an E or a number 5 or an S, Sometimes you are very specific, that, oh no, I know this is N. So you're 100% sure. But sometimes you're not, So you take the best guess at that time. And you said, okay, I'm going to try. If it works, it works. It does not, I'll actually retry. So there's a certain segment of uncertainty. So that's where the AI comes in the picture. It actually tries to mimic that human intelligence. So whenever you actually provide a particular text, it actually will give you a probability with it. So the platform determines that this is probably 99% correct, whereas like in some of the text where we ourselves are not sure, so those it can actually come into like 30, 40, 50%, and then you determine whether to trust that text or not. So a lot of this modeling is inbuilt in Einstein itself. So if you have worked with other AI platforms, you have to do it with OpenAI and other things. You have to build those models yourself, but Salesforce has encapsulated those into the Einstein Vision, so you don't have to worry a lot about the data modeling or the mapping part. So it does have a lot of different benefits. One of them is the visual search. It helps your brand to be recognized more. It helps with the product identification as well. So suppose like you are working for Coleman, and then somebody went to camping, and they took a picture, and that is in the internet. So at a certain point, like with the image classification and with the optical character recognition, you might be able to tag your brand with that particular image to see where that is being taken. It actually gives you more geographical data as well. So as with any machine learning, you have the data set and you have the models, and based on that, you get the predictions. So a lot of these things are done inbuilt by Salesforce. You have the data set, you have the models, and based on that. So it can be used in a lot of different industries. Like I was talking to a lot of people. So I met Steve Simpson over here. So he's a technical architect, certified technical architect, and he was mentioning that he used OCR in the medical industry, in pharmaceutical industries, where they were trying to patch up different pills using the different labelings. Then you can actually, like, one of the other use cases that I have seen is in the financial industries. There's like checks that has to be processed in scale. So that's where it becomes handy. You pass on all the checks, and then it does the processing and put it against individual customers or accounts. Then it can be used in the medical industry as well. Like there's a lot of documents that sit lying in hard copy. There's a need to actually automate all those things. So when you cover all these use cases, one of the core problem is the liability of it. In terms of regulations, that's where Salesforce covered as well. So you have this health insurance protectability and accountability tied into it. So your data is secured, so you'll be able to use that. So it might get a little bit more technical. If you have any questions, please ask. If I need to go a little bit slower, please let me ask for that as well. So in terms of the OCR, so the basic functionality is that it actually helps you to get the text from any image or PDF. Though Einstein Vision supports a lot of different languages, altogether it supports 39 languages, but just for OCR, English is only supported. They're in the roadmap, they have more languages to support. As I mentioned, Salesforce does have some inbuilt model for the artificial intelligence that is used for the optical character recognition. So one of them is the OCR model. So that helps you to get the text from certain predefined types. Suppose if you want to scan a business card, you'll be able to do that. So once you let Einstein know that, okay, this is a business card, and it falls with the ACR model, it will try to actually map those and give the proper text to you. So sometimes it can be complicated because, like, the business card of your company might be different from another company. Someone has logo here, someone has logo there. How does Salesforce identify? So that's where, based on if it is a very difficult business card, you might have to have one more layer in between. And how to do that, I'm going to briefly touch, but I'm not going to go into more details because I wanted to keep it more interactive so that everybody has a wider understanding. The other model, it is tablet V2, and this is the part where Salesforce is not sure that what kind of format you are expecting. So it can be a tabular format, it can be a form, it can be a passport, it can be your pay stub, and so on. It can be any customer invoices as well. So it does provide you certain data in certain format, but then a lot of the data is more generalized so that you can consume. So I'm going to go through some of them so you'll have a better understanding of what it is. So in terms of, like, whenever we have this image, we actually send to Einstein, and it actually gives us a response. So this is a typical response that we get from the Einstein platform. So first is the label, which means what is the actual text? Is it my name or is it my email address and whatnot? So it actually provides that label. The second is the probability. As I mentioned, for some text, it is 90%, sometimes it's 30%. So it actually provides how much certain it is regarding that particular text. Then the next part is pretty interesting. It actually provides you an XY coordinate where that text resides. So that can be really handy. So if you are building a custom image or a custom form, and you have provided a text on certain segment of the page, and then now Einstein is going to actually provide you that particular coordinate. So when you automate, your process within Salesforce using flows, Apex, and whatnot, you can directly loop into that particular coordinate to get that text. Then it has some other optional responses. So if you are actually use tabular data, so it can try to identify the row and column. Then if you are actually using a business card, it can try to find the different entities like org, person, and so on. And then the final one is the forms. So the forms are the most difficult ones because like Salesforce inbuilt just supports a certain set of forms, which I'm going to cover a little bit later. But then if there's any other custom forms, suppose like your company invoice or any other things, it does provide you with a key value pair. So suppose like you have in the form email colon, then your email address. So it will try to form a pair like with the key as the email and the value as the value so that you can actually have it handy and use it. So before we actually try to use Einstein, we have to sign up for that. It's not automatically inbuilt in your org. So you have to sign up. So in order to sign up, you can actually use Salesforce to sign up, or you can actually use Heroku to sign up. Both of them are Salesforce products. So I recommend using Salesforce. Then once you sign up with Salesforce at the backend does few things. So one of the things that it does is that it actually helps you to create a connected app so that Einstein can actually reach you, your org. But then you have to have that other implementation where you can reach the Einstein. So one way service is done if you actually sign up with Salesforce. And once you sign up, you are going to get a particular private key that is in PAM format, and that will be used to authenticate with Einstein. So that anybody can't actually log in and get the service they need. So these are pretty handy and important. So make sure that whenever you have the PAM file, the private key, you save it in a secure location. So one of the core thing about the implementation is the authentication. So though it is part of this broader ecosystem, so these are two separate entities. You have your Salesforce org, then you have your Einstein platform. So the Salesforce org, even though like from a Salesforce perspective, you have end users who are just seeing a single ecosystem within Salesforce, but this Salesforce org has to connect with that Einstein service. So there's multiple ways to authenticate. So going forward, like long time back, it was username password, then they had the security issue, then it came to multiple ways of authentication. One is SAML that majority of the time like the Microsoft services use. Then you have OpenID. But anyways, I'm not going to go in details. So JWT, which is Java Web Token, is one of the standard way to communicate. So that's where we're going to use to communicate with Einstein service. And it does have two different parts to it. At the first, that it tries to validate that whether you are a right entity or not. So you request that Einstein service with your private key that I am that person. And once it authenticates, it actually gives you an access token. And the access token has a general timeline. It can be a 1 day, 30 minutes, and so on. And then with that access token, you can request for that resource. So that is called authorization. So in our case, we're expecting to get the text from that particular image. So that is the resource that we're expecting. So in terms of the implementation, like if you wanted to implement this JWT flow, there's multiple ways to do that. So one of the core one is that you can write everything in Apex, So there's two different calls to get the access token and then to get the text using authorization. So you can do it in Apex. So there's a lot of implementations in the web, So if you search for OCR implementation, majority of the implementations that you're going to get is through raw Apex. So I gave some link here. So it's the GitHub repository. You can actually download and use that. And there's some external sites as well, which actually does the whole implementation as well. But one of the issues that I felt is that it's totally code-based, So you have to build a lot of code to manage this one. This is not out of the box. This is part of custom development. And as there's code involved, you need a developer to maintain. If there's any change required, you have to ask a developer to make that change. The other way we can do is using named credentials. So this is an out-of-the-box option from Salesforce, which actually helps you to connect to any external services. We can leverage that one. So it actually reduces the code part. And once we configure the name credentials, we can actually use it in a particular flow. So everything is configuration based. There's no code required. But one of the catch over here is that the flow has a beta feature for a particular functionality. So for that, unless it is generally available, you'll not be able to use it. So that's why, like, I'm going to show like how you can use it in a flow, but majority of some of the code snippet I have is in Apex, so that you can readily use it if you wanted to go in production. So either ways, the recommendation is to use name credential, and either you can use flow or you can use Apex. So when you are trying to configure the name credentials, so the name credentials, when it came, it was pretty basic. So you can actually connect to any external service without any authentication. So you can just provide the URL, and then you can provide the option as no authentication. But if you wanted to choose the authentication, it has a lot of different options. So one of the first options that Salesforce came up was username password. You can just give a username password and you can do that. But it had a lot of security breaches. Then there's a lot of other ones that came up. So the one that we wanted to use is JWT. So I'm going to show the image a little bit later as well. So once you select that you want authentication, so there's two different JWT authentication you're going to see in the option. One is the JWT, and the other one is the JWT token exchange. So JWT is the one where Salesforce itself creates the access token. So which is not helpful for us, because like we were trying to get the access token from Einstein. So that's where we have to use the second one, which is JWT token exchange. So using that private key, we're gonna generate something that the Einstein service can use, and after that we can use the access token and then call. So even though this is a lot of code right now, a lot of commands right now. So the main goal is to actually set up the certificate so that you can actually connect with the Einstein services. So remember, we got this private key. So we have to make that private key to a particular format that Salesforce can import. Salesforce can import that is called JKS, which is Java Key Store. So we have to bring to that particular format and then use it. So to do that, like, you'll not be able to do out of the box with Salesforce. So you have to use some external softwares. For this one, I actually used OpenSSL. So you install that software, and then if you do all these commands, it's gonna give you that JKS file or Java Key Store file. And in the process, there's a step where they're gonna ask for your password. So make sure that you remember that password, because later on when you try to import this one, Salesforce will ask for that. So once you get that JKS file, you save it, and then you go to Salesforce Setup. In the Salesforce Setup, if you go for certificate and management, there's 3 different ways to create a certificate. The first one is the Salesforce certificate that you can automatically create. Then there's a CSI certificate, which is very similar to any secured site, any SSL. And then the third part is that you can actually import a JKS to create a certificate. So once you go to that, you'll get a screen like that, and it will actually ask you to upload that JKS file. You upload that JKS file and you provide the password, and then you'll see the certificate in your list. So now you're set to use a certificate to communicate with Einstein. So this is a sample name credentials. So you see, like, there's few attributes here which are very important. The first one is the top URL. So this is the URL where we're going to request the service, meaning that I want the text. I'm going to pass the image to you, give me that text. And in the bottom, you'll see there's few other things. So over here, you see the authentication protocol is JWT token exchange, which I just explained. And then you have to provide an access token endpoint. So in name credential, what it is doing, it is actually making two calls for you. So previously, if you had that code, you have to write code to do that two calls, but name credentials itself is doing that both the calls. So you have to provide the endpoint to get that access token. And as this is Salesforce, like these are pretty standard. So like whatever I have here, you can readily use it. So one of them is the Vision, that OCR. The other one is access token. So once you set up that one, you have to give your username, which comes as named principal. So you actually provide that, and then you add the certificate we just created in the last. So once we give this thing, and if you can save these name credentials, you're set to communicate. So previously with Apex, you have to do two calls. Now you don't need to go. You have to just call this name credential, and it's going to do all these calls for you. So now see that how we can actually leverage that in particular flow. Okay. So you open a screen flow, you click the action. So if you click the action, you'll see at the bottom there is this option that create HTTP request. So you select that one, and then it will ask for you the name credentials. And this is the name credentials we have just created. So you provide the name credentials, you provide the endpoint. So actually it's pretty trivial. So it actually collects that endpoint for you from that name credentials. So you don't have to edit it. Like if you just select it, it's going to show the bottom endpoint. The next image is a little bit tricky. So you see, like once you hit next, it actually asks you that what kind of call it is going to do. So there's multiple different kind of HTTP calls you can do. By default, Salesforce supports the GET call. So you want to get information. But for this particular scenario, we need to have a post call to get the data. But this post method is in beta right now, so you'll not be able to readily use it. So you can actually try to test it out. When it becomes generally available, you can do it. But you'll not be able to readily use it in production. So once you set that one, then you have to provide some query parameters, which I'm going to cover a little bit. So you'll actually provide what kind of model it is, then what image you want to send, and then there can be a few other parameters. So I didn't do it because it was in beta. So I actually used Apex, which I'm going to show a little bit. So generally, like for this kind of talks, I actually give a demo, but then in the demos, sometimes things goes wrong, internet connectivity, text smaller, bigger, and these things. So this time I just decided I'm just going to take some screenshot and go over it. So this is a sample code that you can actually use to connect with the Einstein Vision OCR. So at the top part, you have the image URL. So I actually got a random URL from the internet. Then, so you see the set endpoint. So you create an HTTP request, and over there you provide the set endpoint. And so generally, like if you're writing in Apex, you provide the URL. So over here, we're just providing the name credentials. So you provide the name credentials, and then we provide few other parameters. One of them is we provide what is the model. So over here, we are going to use the OCR model. So we mentioned that. And then we can actually subcategorize as well that what kind of additional task it needs to do. So I can just say that, okay, it's a business card, it's a text, or it's a form, and so on. So you can do, once you hit it, you are going to get the response. So I'm just going to go through some of the examples that I did, which might be handy for you. So if you need the code, I can just later on give you the code. So suppose like there's a tabular image, and we wanted to extract those image. So the way you're going to configure it, you provide the image URL. So it can be like if you're within Salesforce, even like the image can be loaded as part of case. You can just provide the URL of that particular case. Then you put the name credentials, and over there, if you see, you use the same model, OCR model, and over here you mention table. So Salesforce OCR, like Einstein OCR, knows that you are actually looking for a tabular data. So when you hit this one, so this is kind of a sample response that you get. So it knows this is a tabular data. So in the response, it provides a JSON response, which you can parse through later on. So it's the table. And then you see like there's a city. And then within the city, like you'll see the label as San Francisco. So it's trying to actually capture the San Francisco. So it is a very big JSON, so I didn't actually go through that. But there's a lot of attributes with that. If you just click it, it will actually give you the probability that how much it thinks that it is San Francisco. Then it's going to provide the XY coordinate as well. So this is with text. Then you can do it with business cards. So suppose like if you want to scan this particular business card. So you have this particular image URL that you provide. And you see at the bottom, at the task you just provide as contact. So once you hit that, Salesforce knows that this is a contact that you wanted to use. So it actually provides the response, the JSON response as contact, and then it actually provides the label. So over the label is like Randy. But this is a happy scenario. Generally, it's not happy as it is, because the business card can be very complicated. So you see like the image is here right now. Then for some company, the image can be there. The total format can be different, So that's where like if you have a complicated business card, or it's better to have a data model on top of that. So one of the way to do is that you define a custom metadata. And in the custom metadata, you define, okay, so if this is the XY coordinate, then I know this is name. If this is that, this is, so then it actually, once you get that text, then it will, you will have to do a little bit more processing to identify all the different attributes. I wanted to actually go through that, but like, then I figure out like with time, I'll not be able to cover all these things. So I'm already at, I think it's 32 minutes, So probably in one of my next session, I can actually get a business use case, probably like the checks or something, and I can directly show the implementation. So then Salesforce out of the box provides a lot of different forms, So it supports 6 different. So you can actually use the driver license. You can have this 1040 form. Then the W2 form. The passport is just supported for Australia, Canada, and United States, and UK too. Like other passports, it does not support. Then for pay stubs, it actually supports for ADP and Workday. And then you can actually scan the permanent resident card. So with the forms, so it's a very similar process. So over here, so the first one with the model ID. So I tried with both, I tried with the OCR model and I tried with the tablet V2. These are the 2 models available. For both of them, I got the same output. But as per Salesforce document, they actually tell you to use tablet V2. Then you mention the task as form, and then there's one more attribute that you can send, which is the form type. So over here, we're passing as DL, which is driver license. So it supports 6 different forms. So you can mention which ones you want to. So it's not working.